father and stepmother were charged with forceful confinement on Wednesday. The stepmother was also charged with aggravated assault. The child's grandmother and mother had fought with the DPG for custody since 2015.
Feel free to grab a pair of headphones. You got some?
For the first 4 years of her life.
I'll make sure they're
Custody
working.
was then granted to the girl's father. In international news, the death toll from Ebola has reached 1,000 in the Congo. The outbreak declared in August is now the second deadliest in history. Dealing with the situation has been difficult due to security concerns. Centers have faced numerous attacks while trying to deal with the outbreak. A Cameroonian epidemiologist with the WHO was killed last month during an attack on a hospital in Butembo. Butembo was attacked again this Thursday. There have been 119 attacks since January in the Congo. 42 attacks were directly against health facilities. 85 health workers have been wounded or killed. The WHO says this Ebola outbreak is geographically contained despite the rise in cases. To hear the newscast and learn more about the news team, visit cjlo.com.
We may be about to go on the air.
Okay.
Yep. And we're back. It is Sunday, May the 5th, one day past Star Wars Day.
Indeed.
We missed our window on that one. And we are Cinema Smackdown. I'm Michael Brody. I'm joined today by Shane Simmons.
I can't tell you how excited I am to follow all that Ebola news.
And we have a special guest with us today. We are joined today by Molly Ann.
Hi.
How are you today, Molly Ann?
I'm okay.
Doing super good as usual.
Awesome.
We were having a nice chat about the positive world we live in the green room.
We have a green room?
Well, it's not as green as some green rooms, but it certainly has its waiting before you go on the air.
Oh, it's a tiled room. We call it the bathroom.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
It's Fonzie's office. We all know the quality of the Fonzie office.
There's a jukebox in there?
No, you don't remember Happy Days.
Oh, I do. Yes, I do.
Because there was
Oh, I do.
there was The Office, which is so cool to be in a smelly men's bathroom in a low-grade diner. It certainly shows you that he was the coolest man who ever wore a leather jacket and lived in the suburbs.
And Ron Howard's directing career never got out of it.
He had a few good pieces in the early period, but let's be clear here. Night Shift is a pretty ballsy movie compared to
The Career of Donnie Most.
The Career of Donnie Most. There we go. All right, so today we are going to do a little quasi-interview with Molly Ann and talk a little bit about some of her experience in the film industry and also touch a little bit on some movies that affected her, as we like to do whenever we have a guest on. I ask them to prepare a list of films that either they love or hate or have some other significance. Apparently she has prepared one of these lists. I have not previewed this list. Mm-hmm. It could all be Japanese.
It might be all stuff we've never seen.
That's right.
Entirely possible.
Entirely possible.
We will be unable to argue for or against.
But as we begin the show, I say, let's talk a little bit about how you had a little period of your life in which you worked in the film industry. Was it a casting office? What kind of place were you working?
I worked in 3 places, in fact. I worked for a talent agent. So, better? Okay, so I worked for a talent agent, so booking actors for auditions, in theory booking them for roles if they got them, etc., etc. Then I worked on set really briefly for about a 3-month period for a, how would you describe it? It was called The Hunger.
Right up to your face.
Okay. It was called The Hunger. It was... Whoop.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's gonna.
This
is the fun of low-grade studios.
Yeah, so it was an anthology, an erotic anthology series, a horror...
Erotic-horror.
Erotic-horror, yes, anthology series, which meant some episodes were kind of okay and other episodes were really, really not okay. Mm-hmm. So I did that, and then I went to work for ACTRA, which, as y'all may know, is the union that represents actors in Canada, except in British Columbia, working in English film and television and radio.
Well, the only thing I know for sure is that both you and Shane here, at least peripherally, had something to do with that Hunger show. Mm-hmm. Shane at least had dealings with producers?
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas you had on really involved stuff. So I'm just here as a happy observer. I want to hear some dirt. Let's hear. As I understand it, neither of you had to sign NDAs.
Nope.
No, that's true. That's true.
And so therefore, both of you are free to burn some bridges right now. Let's hear what you really thought of Tony
many
Scott.
Many of those bridges are already in the river.
Yeah. I did meet Ridley Scott's wife. She was on an episode.
She was an actress on the show?
She was an actress on the show.
So I take it if Ridley Scott was 68 or so at the time, his wife was 20? How old would she have been?
I would say early 30s.
There we go.
Early 30s. She was extremely nice.
Because he's in his 90s essentially now, or he's in his 80s. He's in his 80s. He's still directing $250 million movies, and he's in his 80s.
He could be a cardiac surgeon. I'm not sure if that's better or worse.
See, at that age, they usually take away your car keys, but apparently they don't take away your keys to the Alien franchise.
No, but they do put the CGI machine firmly in your hand at that point. They're like, we can't trust you to make a man in a suit movie anymore, so prepare for the giant brush of CGI to cover over anything that has a special effect in it. As witnessed during the lovely Alien Covenant, not a movie that rates very high in the Ridley Scott filmography, as most people would agree. At any rate...
Well, the Hunger TV show does not rate high on any of the Scott's filmography.
Yeah. No. They produced, by the way, they just to defend them slightly, of all the things that they did put their names on as a production team, they did work on a TV show that's very near and dear to me. The worst titled best show. So I guess the ratio of worst title to best show, this is the one that has the highest, and it is called The Good Wife. And
right.
It is an exceptionally well-written show.
And an exceptionally poorly titled show.
Exactly.
Yes.
I have tried to get people to watch that show. You have better luck getting a raging misogynist to watch Gilmore Girls than you do to get almost anybody to watch a show called The Good Wife. I mean, you pretty much spend 7 seasons wondering where the bad wife is. When is she going to make an appearance? The Macaulay Culkin, if you will, of The Good Wife.
Referring to The Good Son, the Macaulay Culkin murder spree film.
Exactly.
The classic.
So tell me, is there anyone that you ran across other than Ridley Scott's wife of note from that period? Is there dirt to be dished now that I've laid it up?
I'm not sure how much actual dirt. Let's see. I worked with... now I can't remember any names that have just flown out of my head. Lori Petty.
Oh yeah, Lori Petty.
Yep, she burned a lot of incense in her trailer, I can tell you that.
Is this before or after she burned down Tank Girl as a property?
After.
She is the savior of Tank Girl, I'll have you know. That movie would not exist if she wasn't in it. She's not the one who almost tanked that franchise to begin with. I would argue that...
I blame Naomi Watts.
Is she in there?
Yeah, she's... there's Jet Girl and... some other vehicle girl, and she's one of those, I think.
She's Jet Girl, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would blame more the prosthetic kangaroo makeup on Ice-T than I would Lori Petty's mediocre performance in that movie. But that is the movie that famously had an actress fully contractually bound to the movie who then refused to shave the side of her hair for the film, and they fired her over it. And that was a big lawsuit, apparently. And then Lori Petty stepped in at the last moment.
God, so many of those things, including that hairdo, would be CG'd now. The kangaroos would be CG.
Oh, yeah, totally.
If you had a big enough star saying, I don't want to shave my hair, fine, we'll CG your hair. That's standard procedure now.
In the old days, they would just use literal cell frame animation to fix your hair if they had to.
Now, the cell animation in that film is fantastic. But that sequence lasts 1 minute. And then it's right back to the garbage.
Well, what are you going to do? It's, unfortunately, that's just the Tank Girl world we live in. The comic has lived on. It does still exist.
Still waiting on that reboot.
Oh, God. It's going to happen. And it's going to star the sheriff from Stranger Things. Because from now on, he's your go-to guy for
go-to reboot?
Terrible comic book reboots. It'll always be him. Sheriff Hopper, we need you in makeup. We got to shave some of your hair off.
I can't wait to see him
the
as...
kangaroo.
No, I like the idea that he's Tank Girl.
Okay.
He is Hellboy. He can be Tank Girl.
Fair enough.
I can't wait to see him as both as the new Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America.
Exactly. This is how like Sam Jones in the '80s played both Flash Gordon and Will Eisner's The Spirit. You know, that's you gotta make your mark, and you gotta keep what you. Chris Evans is not just Captain America; he is also the Human Torch. He is also one of the bad guys in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I assume his next film he will be Sandman.
He's going to star in Ed the Happy Clown.
There we
go. That's that adaptation that we've been long waiting for.
Well, I would have liked
the greatest comic book movie ever made, or ever will be made.
In 1987, when it was first promised.
Right.
By modern standards, less so. Although I would be more inclined to see a movie by that director if it was that film than anything he's done in the last 30 years. What's his name?
McDonald, something.
Yeah. So the director of
Kevin
Highway 61.
McDonald?
Nope, Kevin McDonald.
No, that's the Kids at Hall, right? I always get that confused. Some other Canadian name, McDonald.
So other than incense, what shenanigans did Lori Petty get up to?
I don't really remember that many. She mentioned A League of Their Own at least once to me as I was carrying an umbrella for her.
The indignity of a person of my stature having been in A League of Their Own, having to endure this.
Yes, this harsh Montreal sun.
Resume.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, if she'd mentioned, Point Break, that would impress me.
Sure.
Good.
Well, it was a weird, not quite hit, but still very well respected movie.
Highlight of everybody who's in that film.
Yes.
Especially Gary Busey.
Yes. And
Keanu Reeves did nothing else ever of note. Sad. He's just vanished from the...
I mean, once you pass on Speed 2.
Yeah, well... that is actually one of the wisest career moves he ever made.
Yep. 100%. And in my opinion, you kind of go from Point Break straight... And I do this. I leap from Point Break straight to John Wick. That's my Keanu Reeves. Mm-hmm. Everything in between is not for me. And yeah, that's where most people's favorite stuff is. Not for me. I'm okay. Once you, although he did make his second Bill and Ted movie after Point Break, it might even have been the same year.
Right. Okay. That's fine. That fits.
And I will say the hilarious thing is when you know he made the second Bill and Ted movie after Point Break, you realize he wears long sleeves in every shot of the Bill and Ted sequel because he was so buff, it made no sense. He really built his arms out after Point Break, so.
Well, see, I prefer his English accent part of his career.
Oh, dear God.
Anything where he's sporting an English accent is just spectacular.
So we've got Bram Stoker's Dracula, and
and
we've also got
what's it? Much Ado About Nothing.
Much Ado About Nothing, in which 80% of his part is cut out. They
can't imagine why.
Kenneth Branagh said in a very candid interview, he said, "We cast Keanu Reeves based on auditions, and he was amazing. We filmed him, and he was amazing. And then we watched the dailies and cut it together, and none of it worked. None of his performance worked. So they just kept trimming it down to a point where I think now it works even less well than it would have had they just left a little more of it in. Mm-hmm. Because it's very abrupt how he shows up and disappears from that movie repeatedly. But at any rate, yeah, I mean, Branagh had nothing but good things to say about him as an on-set performer, but some people weirdly translate later, so you live and learn. But I think after...
Well, I guess Branagh has an affection for weird accents, because, these days he's doing Belgian.
Is he? Oh,
well,
yes, of course he
Poirot,
is.
yeah.
Of course he is. I like Kenneth Branagh's American accent in the movie Dead Again, which was
the scissors.
Yeah, my real entry into his filmography, more or less. And I actually didn't know if he was American or not, although he has that very put on Americanized British voice.
Yeah, I only like Brits doing American accents if they all sound like Gregory House.
All right, well, we have to go to commercial, so let's see if the announcer for this sounds like Gregory House.
Nope.
Well, you never know. This is an odd show to start with. So far, we're just sort of bouncing around talking about whatever, like we sometimes do.
But I do have to get to my dirt on The Hunger.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because I do have dirt.
Let's talk more about it, yeah.
That was the idea, let's I should talk less and you guys should talk more. I just always want to make my little Kenneth Branagh comment. We have another 30 seconds. Oh, no, we have another minute. This was a long ad. This is a whole minute long. It's the one they're making me play.
They're eating our time. Mind you, this sounds, I'm not listening to it at all, but it sounds better than most of the ads we get. So.
It sounds like a not too hyped up, is another.
It sounds produced. So.
Yeah. And it also sounds like a low rent. Wow. This is really quiet. Compared to the other one, the sound level was super low.
Yeah, this sounds like more like our usual caliber of
Whoever
ad.
they are, they didn't balance right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, we record the in-between parts that are not being recorded here on his thing that he puts online. So if we say something super damning...
Yeah, don't admit to crimes like we have in the past.
By the way, you
during commercial breaks.
admitting to crimes.
Oh, are we on? Are we back on?
We are back on.
Oops.
Well, the ad was ending. You're supposed to...
We're giving some pro tips about how to avoid incriminating yourself on YouTube.
Never mention the chest freezer.
Well, whatever you do, as I was reading yesterday, don't tempt 14-year-olds to send you naked videos of yourself with the
When did I do this?
the text.
I must have missed this part.
There was a YouTube star who sent a bunch of 14-year-old girls notes like, "Well, I want to think of you as my number one fan,
Oh, yes.
but
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I'm just gonna have to prove it with these videos of you naked." Ugh.
Well, luckily I'm about 49 million subscribers away from being a YouTube superstar, so...
And he got sentenced to 10 years this week. 10 years.
Oh, who was this? I missed this story completely.
This is Cinema Smackdown, not YouTube stars.
No.
I'm not required to remember.
But
these.
YouTube is the future. All films will be on YouTube soon.
A lot of them are, especially those awesome
yeah.
giallos that we enjoy so much.
Totally, yeah.
So, Shane, quickly, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience working on The Hunger?
Okay, so The Hunger was very nearly my first screenwriting gig. This was before, it was right around the time I was getting an agent, and I think I got an agent partially because I was in talks with them to write an episode. Mm-hmm. And my experience with them did not go so well. I try to remember the exact sequence of events. So basically, I wrote... I couldn't get hired because I had no credits, and Showtime, which was the broadcaster, they're like, we don't know who this guy is, so, writing samples be damned, we don't care. So I did write a spec script for them, which ultimately did get shot as a short film several years later. But it was one of those divine inspiration, like 3-day bang it out type of ideas. A story about a dapper pair of married necrophiles who are willed the remains of a stranger and investigate why that happened. And they really liked it because it sort of had that, horror element. It had a certain amount of eroticism in that there were sex scenes. And, yeah.
And it meant they didn't have to hire a third actor.
Yeah, it was certainly the potential to be quite low budget, and they were having a lot of budget problems. I remember it was a half-hour format, and they were budgeted at about $1 million per episode, which was enormous at the time. But this is what the Scots brought to the table. And if you see the show, you will wonder how the hell did they spend $1 million per episode on this, because it does not look like $1 million show. It looks fine, it's slick, but there's nothing going on in it that goes, oh yeah, this will cost money.
Well, when you're, as a producer, pocketing $800,000 an episode,
yeah.
it starts to make
yeah,
a
well,
lot
there's
more
that.
sense.
There's that, and I do have a related story about the expense that they went through. But just to finish off my end of the story, on the strength of that script, they played around with buying it outright for a while. Then they didn't. Then they said, okay, well, fine, you're approved as a writer on the show. And the episodes were based on a lot of short stories that were appearing in various anthologies. They would buy the rights to the short story, and then they would get a writer to adapt it. And so they hired me to, or they didn't hire me, they got me to write a outline about how I would handle a particular story that they had licensed. And they got it back, and their reaction was, to say the least, negative, because they were upset that it wasn't so much horror and erotica as funny. But the thing is, they had assigned me a comedy story.
Right.
It was an outright, there was no doubt. You read the thing, it's like, this is really funny. So they hired a comedy writer to do an adaptation of a comedy story and were surprised when I said, well, here's my take on it, and it was funny.
So what you're saying is you were the Lord and Miller of your time.
Yeah, it's...
We hired you to do an exact job of the thing you do. Wait, are you doing the thing we do?
I am the massively unsuccessful Lord and Miller. Yeah, so ultimately I did not work on the show. However, I had enough ties. I did work for the company later on. But I had enough ties to the show that I heard certain stories. And one of my meetings there, I was literally a wall away from Tony Scott. He was in the next room at the time, but I didn't get to meet him. But I could practically hear him pacing back and forth, and I could feel the stress.
You could hear him adding strobe lights and giant aquariums to the room he was in, just to give it that Tony Scott mood.
Yeah, there was. But how do I shoot this so it looks like a strip club? Yeah.
Oh my God, so many strip clubs.
Oh, so many strip clubs.
Many
Yeah.
strip clubs. And every single strip club they play that Nine Inch Nails song.
Oh God,
Closer. Every single strip club. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the era. That was certainly the era.
Oh boy.
But yeah, I do recommend you check out the show if you want to see Michael Gross, the dad from Family Ties, in a very awkward sex scene. That exists.
That's got to be YouTubeable.
But
Yeah, I did not work on that one. I just want to put that out there.
Related to the cost overruns, though, here's a true story that was handed down to me about the show. So there was 2 seasons. The first season was hosted in sort of the bookends by David Bowie, who of course had been in the Hunger movie. That this was sort of like, oh well, let's call it the Hunger, and we'll have the Scots, and it'll sort of like invoke that memory of that early '80s film. And then in the second season...
Oh, no, it was Terrence Stamp the first season and David Bowie the second season, I believe.
Oh, I thought it was the reverse. But, I mean, my memory might be faulty. It was one... It was the two of them, one season, one the other season. I think they started out with David Bowie because that was the tie-in to the movie.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Anyway, so Tony Scott was going to shoot these bookends, which was basically David Bowie in a white room saying, this is the story, doing the Rod Serling thing of, like... this strange story is blah, 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 blah. He's, sort of David Bowie as Crypt Keeper, sexy Crypt Keeper. And at the end of shooting, I think it was the first day of those intros, Tony Scott had managed to blow through the entire budget of all the intros for the entire season. And...
like the classic WKRP episode about blowing through their contest budget in one contest.
Yeah, I won't reveal the identity of who told me this, but it was someone involved in the financing who had to approach Tony Scott and tell him, you just burned through your entire budget in a day. So Tony Scott wrote a personal check to pay for the rest of the intro shoots.
Right.
And told this person on the side, don't tell my brother.
That's a pretty great story.
Nice.
Yeah, it is.
Nice.
Molly-Ann, since we have you here today, and I asked you to prepare a list of films that were personal to you, why don't you tell us a little bit about those? We'll perhaps come back to more industry stories, but let's at least not let the work you did go to waste.
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about this. Now, what was your take on movies that you're either passionate about or have affected you in some way? What did you want to talk about today?
It's funny, I just started thinking about movies that had sort of stuck with me and resonated, and they all seem to have come from me watching them at a certain point in my life, which would be around 11-ish. So that was a while back when movies were regularly on television and you could watch them.
I should have asked you to make 11 of them. Make it a list of 11 movies.
Like one for every year?
11.
Yeah.
11 for 11. All right, so these all have something to do with you were 11 at the time.
About.
And that's when you recall remembering seeing these.
Yeah.
That's a very formative moment. It's right on that cusp of puberty.
Yeah, I mean, 11, 12, I guess. Anyway, so the first one was definitely one I saw on television because there's no way my parents would have taken me to see this. It's a movie called Audrey Rose.
Oh, yeah, I'm familiar with it, but I will say, haven't seen it.
Yeah, well, there you go.
That's right.
I'll draw a blank on that one myself as well.
It's an Anthony Hopkins and...
Marsha Mason.
There you go. I was going to say, who's the female lead in that?
Marsha
I will
Mason.
only watch early Anthony Hopkins if he's co-starring with a ventriloquist dummy. That's a rule. It's just a rule I have.
I like it when he co-stars with a teenage Timothy Dalton. Huh?
Oh, yes.
Well, in this one, he's stalking a couple because he's convinced that their daughter is the reincarnation of his daughter, who was killed in a traffic accident 10 years before. So, not quite a ventriloquist dummy, but there's
Close enough.
some good people on fire scenes, if you like that. But I think it was really my first time coming up against him, something that talked about reincarnation and the kind of adults doing hard adult things kind of way. So it just stuck with me.
Mm-hmm. And is it a positive, a negative?
I think just a tone.
Okay.
I think it was just opened my mind to the possibilities of how stories could be told, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
All right, movie number 2.
Yep.
Poltergeist.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Well, Poltergeist came out in
82.
82.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if you saw it on TV,
I did not actually. That one I saw in the theater.
All right. So there we go.
So I was 12. I can tell you that.
Perfect.
And 12 was probably too young to see Poltergeist in the theater.
I don't know. I would kind of argue that it's the right time for it to hit your imagination, even if it's in a negative way.
Yeah.
It depends. I'm a big supporter of traumatic movie experiences because at least you're feeling something.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I'm so jaded, it takes quite a bit for me to be moved by the generic movie story. Whereas I remember my first viewing of Poltergeist being pretty...
Freaking terrifying?
It was intense.
Yeah, I
It was just
remember
that
it being
clown.
pretty
It
great
was that
for
clown.
what
I
it
woke
was.
up with thinking about that clown for
A lot
quite
of
a long
people
time.
did.
Yep.
There's a lot of
Absolutely
kinder
terrifying.
trauma that goes with that clown.
Are those banned in the States too, like Kinder Eggs?
Yes, the U.S. government frowns on the importation of kinder trauma.
Yes. They like to deal out their own. Okay, moving on to movie number 3, definitely one I saw on television. It's called Invasion of the Saucermen.
Oh, it's like a 50s... The title rings a bell
Exactly.
for me.
It's a 50s sci-fi, quote, horror, unquote, movie.
Do you remember anything about that movie?
I do. It's about a teenage couple who are out in the woods in a car and hit an alien. Because, of course, aliens just land in the woods.
You mean they hit him with the car?
They hit him with the car.
That's pretty awesome.
And so they go off to find the sheriff and say, oh no, we hit this thing, we don't know what it is. And in the meantime, the hand of this alien that they've run over becomes disembodied and starts crawling around.
Oh, it's a crawling hand movie
It's a crawling
as
hand
well.
movie
Awesome.
As well, yes.
Oh, okay.
And a bit tongue-in-cheek.
I love crawling hand movies.
The only notable actor in that movie is apparently Frank Gorshin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Riddler himself.
Yes, indeed. Who plays a sort of homeless, drunk guy who comes across this alien, I believe tries to take the body away.
I have one question and one question only. Does he poke at it with a stick?
This I don't remember.
Because that is the ultimate trope of old
Yes.
1950s horror, 50s and 60s horror science fiction movies. Something falls from the sky from outer space, you gotta poke at it with a stick. And it's always a bad idea.
Do you actually have a second... I mean,
The
obviously
Blob.
you mean the Blob.
Oh,
The
yeah,
Blob,
yeah.
I mean, they parody that in Creepshow.
They do it, they also do it in Night of the Creeps.
True. But again, those are all homages.
Yeah, well, they're all, but I mean, it could, because it was a standard thing.
By the way, I did just look the movie up just to see the amazing... I recommend all listeners look up the movie to see the amazing art on the poster for this, which makes the Martians in the Tim Burton movie look comparatively frightening.
Yeah.
And the one sentence synopsis of the movie... I understood what you were saying, but they lay it out in the one sentence that just makes me legitimately want to see this movie. This is the sentence: a teenage couple accidentally awaken an alien after hitting it with their car. Doesn't that sound like the synopsis for Alf? Isn't that like... And then he became a member of the family.
But, this is why The Thing from Another World is such an outlier of a movie, is because it crashes in a, snowy wasteland. There are no sticks to poke at it.
That's what did it. That was the big change. You do know that, people don't talk about this a lot, but the Thing in The Thing from Another World is essentially a carrot monster.
Yeah, it's a carrot monster.
It's a
carrot monster played by James Arness of Gunsmoke fame.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
It's... It's a carrot monster.
People snicker about that, but it's one of those during the what is the nature of this creature, and they look into its cellular form, and it's sort of like a plant life thing. It's like, like a carrot, basically. And it's such a minor point, but since then everyone said, carrot monster, it's a carrot monster.
It's essentially a carrot monster.
Kills you with beta carotene.
Its only nemesis is Bugs Bunny.
Well, speaking of Bugs Bunny, his favorite, if he was a real person, his favorite show on the
Bugs
radio
Bunny
or
is a
anywhere
real
else.
person to me.
Well, I'm sure he's phoning in as we speak, but I'm sure his favorite show would be CJLO's 1690s Cinema Smackdown, which is what we're all working on right now. And today we're talking with Molly Ann about the movies that affected her as an 11-year-old, and some of her experiences working in the film industry, which seem to have had an interesting crossover with Shane, who's worked on some of the same projects.
Because it's a small town.
Sure is.
You're like that couple on When Harry Met Sally. We lived in the same building, we worked in the same city, we never met. Then we were both in Paris on the same weekend. Whatever that terrible, terrible fake story.
I'm glad you remember that anecdote
really,
better than I do,
forgot
because
about
those interview segments kind of just wash over me.
The one, it's two elderly people, and they just give this laundry list of having been in the same place at the same time over and over for decades, and then meeting when they were both on vacation somewhere. And then you're supposed to feel all...
But they kept covering up for each other's murders, so it was just a romance made in heaven.
Indeed. All right, so Molly Ann, that was 3?
That was 3.
Have we done 3?
We have done 3.
Let's pause from that and talk more about perhaps if there is any more productions you've worked on. What might you have worked on in any capacity, even peripherally, that we may have heard of?
The remake of Rollerball.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
yeah.
How
God.
is that not 5 hours worth of terrible story content?
In my world, it was 8 or 9 weeks worth of terrible story content. But
So you
that's
worked
another
with a pre-jailed John McTiernan.
yeah, I
Oh, is he in jail?
Yeah, I didn't work
John
with him
McTiernan's-
particularly.
Went to jail 15 years ago for
Murder or tax evasion?
hiring a private detective to spy on people and getting caught for it.
Oh, okay.
It was a wiretapping.
Oh,
thing that he
okay,
got caught
wiretapping,
on.
yeah.
But there's a much bigger story than that. But I believe that's the charge they got to stick, and that was he may be still in jail. I think he got out. I believe he's out.
Yeah, he got out through crawling through a series of ducts.
He did kind of, if not invent that, at least make it what it is today. McTiernan did direct the Bruce Willis movie where that was the thing. But at any rate, so you didn't have any dealings with him personally?
Not really, no. I can tell you he was not popular with the crew.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you one of the third AD spit in his coffee.
That's the kind of dirt we're looking for.
Yeah, it was that kind of movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was that kind of movie.
Any connections to the people who worked on it? That was like Chris. What? It was one of the original Chris's before the current lineup of Chris's. This was the Keanu Reeves clone Chris. God, what is his name? He.
Yeah, I can
I'll
witness
find it.
him.
I'll find
I can
it.
see his face in my mind. But no, I never had any dealings with him. But they did keep hiring Chris Klein.
Ah,
Chris
yeah.
Klein. He, like I said, he was the previous generation of Chris's. Now we've got the Pratts and
The Evans. And
Well,
Yeah.
the legitimately successful ones, as opposed to.
he was on the cusp. The
Yeah,
Chris
well,
Klein of the time.
There's a lot of
and
cusp
then
people.
He did Rollerball.
Yeah.
Well, Chris Klein, just as a
Truly a remake no one ever asked for.
No.
Chris Klein started out in the movie Election, where he played. He was a very compelling Keanu Reeves clone in that movie.
Yeah.
And then they tried to springboard a career for him out of that, including dramatic roles, and he always seemed a bit dumb and goofy. So.
His mistake was not taking on a British accent.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can't argue that it seemed to have worked for Keanu. At any rate, so you did a little bit of work on Rollerball.
I did.
It's a shame that wasn't the Norman Jewison film, because of course that was, he's a Canadian director, so that would have made more sense. I guess this is a good time to mention that the production office you worked in was in Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
Yep.
Which is why these were all films and TV shows that came through this city and had probably never would have if it weren't for that massive production tax thing.
The tax credits, absolutely.
Yeah.
That is why this was
Absolutely.
even possible.
The bane of my current career existence.
Because it doesn't exist anymore.
Well, no, it exists, but there's not a lot of production going on in Quebec, so I'm not a Ontario-based writer or a BC-based writer,
Right.
so they get hired before I do.
It is certainly true that 90% of what I watch on television is shot in and around Vancouver. It is unbelievable to me. Every CW show, most of these, anything with a slight fantasy element seems to be shot there.
Yeah, well, we still have a number of what they call runaway productions that come through Montreal, but those come with scripts and casts and everything already attached, and they hire some local actors to fill in gaps for bit parts.
Yeah, one of my coworkers had a theory that things that were going to be a disaster, they would mitigate the cost being sunk into that disaster by filming it here.
Yeah, because we're cheap.
i.e. Battlefield Earth.
Oh,
i.e.
yeah.
Pluto Nash.
Battlefield, oh, yeah. That film is wonderful just for knowing people who are in it, buried under tons of makeup and recognizing their voice. I'm talking to you, Robert Higdon.
Robert Higdon,
I know
as
Robert.
we all know,
Hi, Robert.
has the most distinctive voice.
Oh, yeah.
This side of Bobcat Goldthwait in character, or Emo Phillips, or Dr. John. Or
And to hear exactly that voice coming out of an alien prosthetic head is
it was
wonderful.
A hilarious moment. It makes that movie almost worthwhile. Also, I know you haven't seen this yet, but look for Robert Higdon's amazing cameo in Darren Aronofsky's Mother.
Oh,
It
okay.
is worth the horrible experience you will have sitting through that film, just to see Robert Higdon pretty much tell off Jennifer Lawrence, which is so worth it.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, I am sold. That pitch sold me more than the movie.
Oh yeah, well that movie needs a fair amount of selling. It is the most heavy-handed metaphor film you'll ever see. It screams at you, here is our metaphor, again and again and again, until you finally start saying to yourself, it's becoming too obvious that this is the metaphor. Surely there's another metaphor under this that I'm missing.
It's like you pull off the mask at the end of the Scooby-Doo episode, and it's just the same face as the
Exactly.
mask that you just pulled off.
Yes, that is the movie Mother, starring Jennifer Lawrence, directed by Darren Aronofsky. And what my favorite thing is that people so massively misunderstood the incredibly obvious meanings behind this film that he has done multiple interviews and podcasts where he literally just goes, no, it's about this, and he just says it over and over and over. It's pretty terrible. when you have to go on multiple interviews and just repeatedly explain your movie because everybody's angry at you.
Or because this is how dumb you think your audience is.
Oh no, there was a huge reaction to that film because it was the tiniest art house movie ever marketed like the next giant Jennifer Lawrence movie.
Well, it was the Hunger Games Part 5, wasn't it?
Exactly. That's how people saw it, and therefore, yeah, they had a huge backlash of anger over it. Whereas there was another movie at the exact same time. Ryan Gosling had just made Drive with...
Oh, yeah.
What was that director's name? It's crazy long.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's 3 parts, and it's really...
Oh, Nicholas Friggin Rugen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
All right,
okay, yeah.
So they made Drive, which everybody really enjoyed, or at least critically was very well received, and it was kind of a hit. And they had a follow-up movie 6 months or a year later called Only God Forgives, and they were smart enough to realize this is such an incomprehensible art film that if we release it theatrically in a big way, we will destroy our credibility. So they didn't. They released it direct to digital. That was the smart thing to do, because anyone who saw it didn't go, oh my god, I paid a babysitter and $30 for parking to sit through whatever this is.
And then Ryan Gosling destroyed his credibility by being in La La Land.
For some.
For us.
He almost won me back when he hosted Saturday Night Live a few months after that came out, and he said, yeah, that's right, it's me, Ryan Gosling, the man who saved jazz. That was how he introduced himself. And I thought, wow, I kind of think you get what a hate crime that movie was. So what else do we have here, Mine? You worked a little bit on Rollerball.
I did. Rollerball was really the one that scarred me the most, I would say.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The coffee spitting incident.
Yeah, which was not me. I did not do that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Were there any other foreign objects that ended up in coffee or beverages or food in general? What was the state of the catering is what I want to know. How poisoned was it?
I don't remember getting any complaints from the performers saying that the food was inedible, and if there's a problem with the food on set, the union will hear about it.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it was probably
Because
okay.
if the cast got explosive diarrhea, that would explain a lot of that film to me.
I will admit that while I paid for a rental of Chris Klein, John McTiernan's Rollerball, I do not believe I finished it. I think I got
think
a
it
certain
was
portion
unfinishable.
of the way into the movie.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, I would argue that the original isn't a lot more watchable. It's a little,
I'm not a fan of the original,
it's
I have
a
to say.
little, I mean, it's certainly beautifully photographed.
Yeah.
The original, the James Caan,
Right.
Norman Jewison version is gorgeous.
But it also has that 70s pacing where the story had better be good, or the modern audience just can't follow it anymore.
Right, but that's
Yeah, but I
an
think it's
argument.
just generally a weak science fiction concept. You could throw a stone and hit 10 better Norman Jewison films.
Exactly. Yeah. The man had just made 5 movies in a row, which were pretty much masterpieces, and was on the cusp of going on to direct much more interesting work, like Moonstruck, even, which I do think is quite a lovely movie even today. A little stagey, Moonstruck, a little bit like you're watching a stage play, but still kind of a magic film.
That's the one with Nicolas Cage as Jamie Lannister, right?
That's exactly
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
If by which you mean Jamie Lannister's greatest foe was a bread machine. Which, let's be clear, would be more believable than...
Yeah, if he'd lost his hand to a bread machine in Game of Thrones, that would have been awesome.
Yeah, instead of a minor little skirmish thing. At any rate, what other productions, if any, have you touched on?
There was, what was it called? The Heist, I
Do
believe.
you mean the Gene Hackman movie?
No, not the Gene Hackman
I got
movie.
so
Damn it.
excited.
Because that shot you
Yeah.
here as well. Yeah.
There was a film called Heist with Gene Hackman and Sam Rockwell, which is...
They may have shot that here, I don't know.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
they
okay,
did.
I
did.
didn't work on it.
At the end
That's
of
not what I was thinking of.
At the end of the movie,
Yeah.
there's a character who escapes on a boat heading the wrong way on the St. Lawrence to go anywhere.
Right.
Like, if you know it,
Nice.
you're like, wait, that's the wrong way.
There were also major scenes shot at the world's crappiest and now torn down mall in Point Claire. Tucked under a highway. It was disgusting, horrible.
Oh, they've torn that one down.
It's gone
Okay.
now,
I
yeah,
wanna
yeah.
watch it again
They're
now.
building condos there, but I missed that place because every time I pass I go, Gene Hackman stood right there.
So what was your heist movie?
What was it called? It had Ed Norton and
Oh,
Robert De
you mean
Niro.
Oh, the score. The
Yes,
score.
the score.
Oh, you worked on the score. I like
Yeah.
the score.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's garbage, but it has
Well,
it
I
has a lot
love
in common with heist.
I love
Yeah.
that all of Montreal in that film is old Montreal and like
Yes.
3 blocks of it and that's it.
Yep. Well, there is some really beautiful old Montreal photography. There is some interesting choices of stuff that happens, but it is...
There is
I have to say I
Brando
never
being
saw it, but yeah.
Brando being the biggest ass in the world.
So, I mean, I only know one story from this because it was widely circulated.
Right.
But Marlon Brando did not get along with the director, who was
Frank Oz, yeah.
And apparently, the biggest moment was Frank Oz just kept trying to get the scripted performance out of Brando and was failing and failing and failing to get him to say his lines in any capacity. He was giving them unusable material over and over and over. So finally, Frank pleaded with him, "Please, Marlon, just do the scene." And Marlon turned and looked at him in front of the entire crew, and he said, "Mr. Oz, I am not one of your puppets. You can't just stick your hand up my ass and manipulate me like Miss Piggy." It's like...
And that was a wrap for the day, I imagine.
Yeah. This was also the film where Brando was, before they even began, was at odds with the production. He wasn't happy about something, so he showed up with his hair dyed like a fire engine orangey color. And they're like, okay, great, so we have to give you a wig now for the movie.
Nice.
Thanks, Brandon.
He was just done
Brando.
to match the number of revisions.
Yeah.
Throughout the
Just
script.
yeah.
We're on triple single
Remember
now.
me, I used to be a legend, so I get to be the world's most insufferable arse.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break and listen to what is perhaps the second in line world's most insufferable arse, who possibly will be narrating this next ad. We haven't pre-listened to it.
We don't know, yeah.
Could be anyone.
Horrible insult to nobody in particular.
Let's find out.
Are you looking to advertise your
See, that's where we do a much worse, more insulting thing on air than we do in the little break in between that he records. I'd just like to have some kind of segue. We were talking about insufferable asses.
/advertise for more information
Apparently, I just said that the CJLO is a terrible thing because that was a promo for CJLO.
Indeed.
Well, hey guys, how's it going? Good.
Oh, jeez.
Say, do you guys like music? Well, then do I have a show for you?
This is amazing. I love this one.
6. It's called Grade A Explosive.
It's like the worst Chipmunks ripoff ever.
Yeah, really.
Songs, good songs.
We're almost back, by the way.
So tune in to listen to some great stuff from
You should lean right into
Yeah,
the
I know.
microphone, by the way, because you're not moving the needle much. Although we can hear it. It's just I think you're quieter than us.
1690 AM.
And we are back on Cinema Smackdown, CJLO 1690. I'm joined today, I'm Michael Brody, and I'm joined today by Shane Simmons and Molly Ann, who is talking a little bit about her former career in the 1990s, working in Montreal's film scene. We got a little bit of the movies that have shaped you in the course of your life. I think it might be a good time to go back to that.
Yeah, did anyone spit in Brando's coffee, is my question.
This I don't know. I spent less time on set on that one.
Actually, I didn't really get to ask you if you had anything to say about that production in particular, other than you were peripheral to it.
I was peripheral to it. I think that's probably the most exciting thing.
Okay.
But it's a film that had
Yeah.
2 Vito Corleones for the price of one.
Oh, yes. I had to think. I was like, wait, who else is in this? Oh, right, De Niro.
Yeah, and Ed Norton.
Is he the third Vito?
He's the, he's the,
The Dauphin of the...
no, he hulks out once or twice, though. I'm pretty sure. If I remember it correctly, I don't know.
Look, the most important thing to know about Edward Norton's portrayal of the Hulk is that you don't want to make him hungry. You wouldn't like him when he's hungry.
All I remember is towards the end of the film, he races down to the old port to catch a bus out of town, because that's where the bus terminal is.
buses are, yeah.
So, Molly, why don't you favor us with another movie that affected you when you were 11 years old?
All right, this one, very Montreal-centric, is called Ticket to Heaven.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
the cult movie, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It turns out it's based on a book written by Josh Freed, and is a true story, based on a true story. So made in Montreal.
Yeah, it's about pulling someone out of a cult,
It's about
right?
pulling
yeah,
someone
yeah.
out of a cult. So it shows you his sort of induction into the cult, what that's like, and then his family figuring him out, how to get him out.
That was during a particular time when there was a big moral panic about cults going on.
Yeah, early 80s, absolutely.
Everyone's freaking out, saying, "Oh, your kid's going to get abducted into a cult
Yeah.
any second now."
Yeah, there is a cult-breaking movie with Brian Dennehy and James Woods from the same year. I don't remember the title, but it's out there.
Not bestseller,
No,
but that's another one with them.
That's another one with them. But yeah, that's another cult-breaking movie that I believe they're both in. At least James Woods 100%, Brian Dennehy maybe 80% on him. I'm not looking it up. I'm just saying.
So
There was
only
one.
80% of Brian Hennig was in the movie at any time.
Well, he is certainly 80% larger now than he was then. He's always been a man of strong appetites. Your film, Ticket to Heaven, does star Saul Rubinek and the hard-to-look-at Meg Foster.
Yes.
If anyone
Oh,
knows,
Meg Foster,
she
yeah.
has those
Piercing eyes.
creepy, piercing eyes.
Village of the Damned eyes.
Yeah. No special effects needed. Whenever she's in the movie, she's the one possessed by a demon. We just know right away.
Even if there's no demon possession in the movie.
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
Kim Cattrall.
young Kim Cattrall.
And yeah, I mean, I'm just all
Porky's
for
era Kim Cattrall. Yay.
same year.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had an interesting early career. She never quite got as famous as, say, Demi Moore, who also had a very interesting career around the same time. Her strange little roles here and there. But Cattrall, of course,
But
is
Demi
famous
Moore
now
can't.
for-
Yeah, she can't boast of being Sarah Jessica Parker's nemesis.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, let's see, what we were just talking about this, Ticket to Heaven, do you have any thoughts on that one? I mean, did it affect you in some way?
Yeah, again, it was that, just new idea that a cult was a thing. And that somehow,
I see.
that you could be sort of coerced against your
Scooped
will
up.
to be part of a community. And that you could then be deprogrammed afterwards, which I think has largely been debunked.
Yeah, the whole cult panic era kind of gave way to a new round of satanic panic.
Yep.
And it's fun keeping track of the moral outrages and their effects on pop culture.
Right.
Well, this one marked me.
And did you say this was a Montreal shot movie?
I don't know if it was actually filmed
Oh.
here, but there's a lot of...
I mean, I'm
It's got so much Canadian
content.
content
Yeah.
that it's
Yeah.
either here or Toronto, probably.
I will inform you in a moment. I just have to
And that probably would have been in the tax credit era.
Oh, undoubtedly.
The good old days of
Yes.
Canadian film production.
Bubbles galore.
As opposed to, bubbles, but there was more of a genuine attempt to make money with Canadian films as opposed to, we'll get our tax credit and we will make a Canadian film that only the director and his mom want to watch.
It is a Toronto movie with some photography done in San Francisco.
Oh.
So there you go.
So, in other words, second unit, so it could pretend to take place in San Francisco.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we know that that's where all cults were really located.
Right.
It was in San Francisco.
Get a couple shots of the Golden Gate Bridge and, San Francisco, sure. With Sam the Record Man in the background of every shot.
What, was Sam the Record Man not the virgin music of its time? Was it not everywhere?
Well, it was ubiquitous up to, speaking of Ed Norton hulking out, The Incredible Hulk. You can watch him have that big battle in New York City with Yonge Street clearly in the background of all the shots, yeah.
So, what's your next pick there, Molly-Ann?
This one, it's a little film you may not have heard of called Blade Runner. Which,
Obscure.
Yeah, exactly. Notable because I saw it in the theater when it came out at the age of 11. So the first restricted movie I ever saw. And yep.
Yeah, someone snuck you in because you were not permitted to be in there at that age.
My friend's mom just bought us tickets and we went in and she went off and had coffee or whatever it was. And we both sat there with our
That's
eyes
a cool
really
mom.
enormous and went like, we don't understand what Han Solo was doing in this movie.
And of course notable for being a movie you would eventually essentially go on to work with the director of.
Yes.
So that
Sort
is
of,
kind of
tangentially,
interesting.
yes, but yes.
It counts. It's the one of the list that I know of, unless you had a thing with Saul Rubinek that you're not sharing with us.
Some things are secret, Michael.
I saw Saul Rubinek this week on a recent episode of the TV show Billions, and he's still pretty great. He's still hilarious in his little character parts.
I like his career whenever he crops up.
Mm-hmm. And as a director, he did
Jerry and Tom,
which is a minor masterpiece.
Yep.
Little tiny hitman movie. Very, very good.
Yeah, but a real visual flair to it, which is usually not what you get when actors direct.
Yeah, usually when an actor directs, you get an actor's movie, a movie in which people over-emote everything. Kevin Spacey directed a movie called Albino Alligator, starring Matt Dillon, which is 2 hours of Kevin Spacey's favorite B-level actors, because everybody in it is kind of not super successful, but every one of them is giving their Burgess Meredith Rocky acting. They're screaming their lines and over-emphasizing everything.
I don't want to guess what they had to do to get that part.
I want to see the videos. I want to see Matt Dillon earning that part. That guy. And they thought the things that Ben Stiller did in Something About Mary were terrible. At any rate. So, what were we on about? We were on Blade Runner.
We were on Blade Runner.
We were segueing away from Blade
That's
Runner.
a difficult film for an 11-year-old.
Yeah, it really was.
It's also
really was.
a remarkably slow movie. So.
Yeah, and when I finally rewatched it again, not that many years ago now, actually, it held up really oddly.
It is an oddly paced film, and I mean, luckily back in the day they filled in all those awkward gaps with tons and tons of narration.
Yes.
Bland, uninspired narration.
I was so used to the no narration version that I had pretty much forgotten the narration version, that I watched the no narration version with someone recently to show them the movie. And we enjoyed the film, but we had a little issue. And I said, this used to have narration. And she said, well, how much of that was? Well, there was some that was really terrible. So we just went on YouTube where they have all the clips. You can just watch just the narration bits. And I thought, okay, well, yeah, here's a bit of the opening where he says something silly or over-explains something that is clearly on screen. And I said, but luckily, I'm sure there was no narration during the scene, the big climactic moment with Rutger Hauer on the roof. I'm sure they left that alone. And I went and rewatched it, and he talks over it.
Yeah,
I
have to explain.
No, that's terrible.
Let me explain to you in very dour tones what this scene means, stupid audience.
It is extraordinary to watch that now and just think about them being forced to add that to the film by the production.
Because I mean, I do get the hard-boiled detective,
Yes,
like that
some
part
people
of the
really
genre.
like
Yeah.
that part of the movie.
Yeah, but the fact that Harrison Ford is purposely blowing his line readings because he was unhappy to have to do that narration and hope if I do a poor enough job they won't use it.
Yep.
Well, they used it. They fooled him.
Oh dear. I recently heard an anecdote about Laurence Olivier on John Badham's Dracula film.
Oh yeah,
When
big fan.
They did a scene of they had to do a scene of last rites or some sort of religious moment. He had to speak. He had to say the Lord's Prayer, and he said, "Well, my character's Dutch, so I want to do it in Dutch." And the director said, "That might work. Let's see how weird it'll be for the audience." So they filmed it, and everyone was happy with it, but Badham wasn't sure it would work, so he asked Larry, as everyone was calling him, to do one in English. To which Olivier said, "I don't want to, because you'll just use that one." And Badham said, "No, I promise. If the other one's better, I'll use it." And he said Olivier was so negative about the idea, he was positive he was going to turn around and give the worst English language version performance of it. Meanwhile, Olivier turned around and nailed it super hard, like the best acting of his career. And Badham was shocked. And Olivier took him aside right after the scene, and he said, "Just let me make this clear to you. If I go to the premiere of this movie, and that version is in it, I will hold a press conference and tell everyone in the world that you lied to me." I was like, now that's a consummate professional.
Wow.
That is an amazing person. Have you got one last film for us in the 2 minutes we have left?
I do, and it's a very much a left turn from what we were just talking about. It is Singing in the Rain.
You know,
Perennial television favorite.
I mean, as far as movies that have cults that pull people in against
Yep.
their will, that's definitely one of those.
Yeah, well, I'm especially fond of that because it is about the transition to sound film.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it's a very interesting and respectful film about that period, and it is, by my childhood recollection of the movie, wildly entertaining.
It is very entertaining. It's got nice bright colors and good song and dance routines, and it's sort of a love story that's very, very, very vanilla. Dances around in that 1950s way, dances around all kinds of issues of morality.
Yeah, I will say though, I mean, as far as Gene Kelly films go, there are much better dance films with him, where his style of dance was explosive, and it's not in this film. It's very subdued in this film.
Well, I do like the Singing in the Rain scene, where he's running
in the
around
rain.
in the
Right,
rain,
right.
the moment, and that scene is amazingly darkly parodied in a Tom Hanks movie called Punchline, and it is the scene where he's basically telling somebody, "Oh, that's right, I'm the funny guy. Watch this moment," and he has like almost a breakdown while singing in the rain, and abandoning someone on a street corner and skating away down the wet sidewalk while just belting out that song.
There's something about that scene that makes other filmmakers want to commit atrocities to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Clockwork Orange, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't want to go the most obvious route. So, any other thoughts on Singing in the Rain before we cap things off?
What I really like about it now, looking back, is that at the time it would have been the 80s when I was watching this movie made in the 50s about the 20s. It's a sort of interesting
time travel
encapsulation of different paradigms.
And now we're almost as far away from the time you saw it to how far away from the actual period you were when you first saw it.
Yep. This is
That's always frightening when you do that math.
Yeah, let's not do that math.
Well, this has been a fun show. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Really do appreciate it. I have been Michael Brody. This show has been Cinema Smackdown. I've been joined today by... Shh. Quiet, you! I'm doing your outro. No, go right ahead.
Shane Simmons.
Shane Simmons, as we all know, the well-known author of several episodes of The Hunger. Very successful.
More importantly, check out my books on Amazon.com.
One of which I believe is an adaptation of your episode.
There is a story, but it's coming in another collection.
Okay, my bad. I thought you had a full adaptation, like almost a novel, a novella.
No, you're wrong. You're so wrong. You're so very, very wrong.
All right, well, thanks again, Molly Ann, for dropping by.
My pleasure.
And we will throw it to the auto DJ now. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
1690 a.m. in Montreal.
All right, would you go open the door for the...
Who's come pounding on the door? I'll go get it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna freaking hang this up.
We're coming.